Hey everybody, I am Jeremy Reynolds. I am from Zero, the end of prostate cancer. I've been with Luminate since the Convio days when it was called Pagebuilder only and then Team Racer. And I want to say that was 2008 probably that I first got into it. And it's evolved a lot over the years. One of the more powerful, honestly, as I look at other ecosystems, because we all do our due diligence and we look at what else is out there. The thing that is always impressive about Blackbaud and Luminate, and especially you see it more and more in the NXT side of things, is just how much they've put into developing all the API resources and all the different things where you can reach in and you can grab the data of anything that you're looking for. And well, within reason, I guess. And I just want to make sure that I am actually, am I showing for everybody on video, or is it just Eric? I might have accidentally pinned you and now it's just you.
No, I think it's you and me, and then nobody else is on video, so it's just us.
Okay, cool.
But if you're not sharing your screen yet, right?
Not yet. I will be, I'm sure. So yeah, I know for sure. So I've been doing Luminate for a while, and what's great is that it's got lots and lots of API endpoints. And as NXT has started, well, I mean, as it's been growing and maturing, the endpoints that are available there let you talk across systems really well. A lot of us use Relo or Omatic software. Before I get into this, as far as if it's not already obvious, this is pro code. Most of what we're going to be doing here is going to be, if you're a low coder, definitely stick around to see kind of some of the things that we can do. But I will be getting into some JavaScript and some of the heavier tag usage and conditionals. And so to really understand what's happening in a lot of this, it'll be very helpful if you have a background in JavaScript, if you have a background in other scripted languages like PHP, or I don't actually do a whole lot with Angular, but all those different things, React, that how to take data that's remote and put it into your system, because that's the core of an API. Do stick around if you aren't that person, but but a lot of this will be your brain will be full by the end of it, I think. So the great thing about Luminate, all the APIs, Sky API, Luminate, Open Convio API, are great. The SOAP and REST that you can get if you're using web services, then making apps or have a third-party integration that you're trying to talk to Luminate, all that stuff's rad. Sometimes you don't have exactly what you need, and it was cool that 5 years ago, I think it was, they introduced a API method for Luminate that let you say, I want this S-tag, and it could actually give you anything that was publicly available with an S-tag. If you're allowed to grab it with a non-server side request, you could actually get that S-tag and spit it out. Before that, there was an awful lot of stuff that sorry, I also check chat from sometimes. There's a lot of stuff that even with that technique that you couldn't grab. But before that technique even existed, before that get the team razor tag, the S tag method existed, there was something that is, I don't know how widely it's used, but it's a very, very, very powerful technique. And the idea is, if you've ever used Luminate Extend, Noah Cooper, smarter than 10 of me put together, right? And he developed a JavaScript library, if you're not familiar with it, that lets you use Zepto or jQuery and actually kind of go and make requests to the API without really knowing what's happening in the background. Eric just put that into chat. If you don't already know that, he also had a version that they came out with that's made specifically for AngularJS and using AngularJS with it. Haven't messed with that one as much, but both of these are basically using the basic technique that I'm going to be talking about today. He basically built these systems that use that roll your own API, and then they spit it into a really well-developed framework. So if you're using Luminate Extend and you use like Luminate Extend API to ask for a specific method, when you look at the To set it up, you have some page builder files that you had to make. When you look at that, ultimately what he was doing was really just setting up a wrapper that uses the same technique to basically say, hey, Luminate, I would like to get a page builder page, but I don't want you to spit it out like you'd spit it out for everybody else, where it runs through your whole template system and it runs through a page wrapper and does all that. The technique is basically to say to Luminate, I want this very specific data. I want it based on these S-tags or specific text that I've already written out ahead of time. And I want just that. And then using that to basically create your own JavaScript object and process that through JavaScript, whether you're using jQuery or something like React or whatever. Okay, a lot of words there. Let's actually take a look at what that actually means. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. We're definitely recording, right?
Yep.
Okay, let me share screen. I'm just going to share my whole desktop. Let's hope this goes well. All right. And Eric, feel free to speak up, if since I'll have questions off screen. Your shared screen can only be seen by hosts and co-hosts.
Let's see. We'll check that in. You're right now, you're screening a Wordle challenge, so maybe we're crowdsourcing your Wordle.
Yeah, right now I'm going to demonstrate kind of some of the things to start off with. Last year at the start of bbdevcon, if you're here, Eric, I'm not sure if everybody else can see me though here.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask for folks to throw a reaction up if you can see Jeremy's screen. I can only see Eric. All right, let's see. Shared screens can see by. All right, I think I just hit a magic button.
Boom, you did it.
Now allows it. Is that
great victory? There we go.
People can see Wordle. We're good.
Money. All right. So last year, just to get people familiar with spatial chat, we were tossing around some ideas what we might do, and start out with Q&A, and then somebody had in the NXT side. There's a default user in the database. I forget his name, but everybody. Robert Hernandez. All right. So we talked about what if we could do something with him, and somebody else brought up Wordle, and I started thinking about this, and just to demonstrate how flexible Luminate can be when you use this roll your own API, we built the entire Wordle challenge, Robert Hernandez find scavenger hunt thing right here in Luminate. And I'm going to show off some of the code that I've got here. Now, just as a warning, I am managing a bunch of different code. Hopefully, I don't end up screwing this up, and but bear with me if I need to search for random code here on these different examples. But want to start out by talking about how I did the scavenger hunt, because how it worked was when you were in spatial chat, there was basically a box that we could share a frame from a website. So if you look at my URL here, is this big enough for everybody? Do I need to zoom in a little bit? Give us a show of hands here if the screen res is too low for us. Give us a thumbs up if it's good. Give us a thumbs down if it's not. Thanks, Tana. I'll assume it's good in the meantime. But all we did was we basically selected this page right here, and if you look in the URL, you can see this is actually. Last year I talked a little bit about S84 tags and how you can upload things directly to your Luminate instance and then access those, right? This is the URL format that you'd use when you use an S84 tag. Well, all that to say, you can actually save assets on your Luminate FTP server and access them directly from anywhere on the web. So this is actually a regular HTML file that is saved to our Luminate instance in our custom folder. So I have a custom folder, and if you know the URLs for everything, not everything's locked down. So people can actually go and directly access certain files on your server. You got to be judicious when you do this, obviously. You don't want to give away your entire donor list in a CSV and just make it naked on the website, right? But you could. So one of the things that I did was I just took a simple HTML page, and we threw it up onto our Luminate instance into a regular folder. And this is actually URL, which means on my Luminate server, we've got a custom folder, and then I have dev, bbdevcon, and scavenger.html. So this is actually a really simple page. And I'll show this in my code browser here in a sec so that it's actually been linted and pertified. But just looking at this page, it's actually a rather simple HTML page. And what it does is when somebody submits the form, JavaScript is listening to this form, and it's going to respond with whatever you want, and it's going to spit out an answer, right? And so how the scavenger hunt worked was when you hit submit on this form, it's actually doing a fetch request through JavaScript, and it's asking the roll your own API page that I've created in Luminate whether or not it's the right answer. Okay, and I'll show you what that looks like in the Luminate code here in a sec. By the way, all these examples, I am actually retouching them because I looked at my last year's stuff and it's referencing a bunch of files that aren't on Git. So I'm actually going to upload a new GitHub repo that has just the details from this example. But in the meantime, if you want to find my GitHub, it's JD-0. So github.com/JD-0. You see S84, this has a bunch of the stuff I had from last year. You're going to see a new one called Roll Your Own API. I'm just noodling with it, and I figured you guys don't want to watch me messing around in Terminal to upload it, so I'll do that after this call. But it'll have a breakdown of these in a way that's been a little bit more abstracted so that you can kind of picture how you'd use it on your side. And it should work if you're at a beginner/intermediate level. If you can read JavaScript, I'm trying to make it so that you don't need to be a tech wizard or a JavaScript guru to be able to do it. So anyway, what would happen here though is when you would submit this, it would check the Luminate, my Luminate instance. It would just basically access a page builder page. And that page builder page, really all it is it's a conditional that says, take whatever was provided in the URL, and if the word is this, do that. If the word is this, do that. If the word is this, do that. And if the word is this, do that. So let me go ahead and show you right here. This is the actual code that's from here. You can see anything in white. These are S-tags, right? So just looking at what we got here. S-tags. I love me the T9 tag. It lets me basically eliminate. It's the same as a trim in JavaScript or PHP. So T9 just says whatever you output, trim the beginning and the end, any negative space, new lines, spaces. Okay, non-special characters, it'll trim that off. So almost everything you'll ever see me do has a T9 wrapped around it, just so that I can get rid of all the extra space around stuff. That actually lets us do things like when you're using T9. Normally, if you're doing a conditional like this and you put space around it, it's going to break your conditional, because if you're doing conditional, it says if this equals that, you're never going to equal that when you've got all this extra space in there. When I add T9 to it, now all of a sudden it actually will respect as though, so it lets me pertify things. So you can see throughout here, I'll use spacing just to make it a little bit more readable for myself. All that is powered by is T9. So a little pro tip there. But this is what is powering the scavenger hunt. So all that we're doing with the scavenger hunt is when we submit that form, it's looking, and you will see that when you look at, you can see it right there in the source of the page here on the scavenger hunt. All we're doing is we are doing a fetch, which is the JavaScript API for reaching out and grabbing someone. This would be similar to Ajax or the XRP response or JSON in jQuery. And there's tons of other methods for capturing. But all we're really doing here is we're saying, hey, fetch this, and whatever is in this here form field, when I hit submit, do a fetch request, and all it is this roll your own bbcon page builder page I had set up. You can see this is very clearly a normal page builder page, right? Roll your own bbcon. Take off the page wrapper. You always need to do that anytime you're doing roll your own API. And then add the query based on whatever the user's text input was. So actually really straightforward. All we're just going to do is we're going to send a URL that is really the exact same as if I took this URL and I click right here and I do the word test. All right, so this is literally that URL if I were doing the fetch request with the word test, right? What you'll see here is when I look in my thing, you won't see test in here. You'll see the word found, you'll see the word dapper, you'll see the word impact, you'll see the word donor, right? So if I use the word found and I just submit found, F-O-U-N-D, hit submit, it triggered what did he show you? Okay, if I were to, that's using the interpreter on my JavaScript. I can do the exact same thing by going directly to that URL. And what you'll see when I view the source is what did he show you? The only thing it's returning here is an H1. Because when you look here, that's all that my conditional has, right? Got T9 to eliminate my extra space. And what this is, S334 says, what is my URL? That's your best friend when you're using an API like this because it lets you control what's responding to you based on some part of the URL. So S334 says, look at the parameters in this URL. In this case, look at the parameter Q. And then if it matches the word found, then respond with this. Now notice I didn't use X's on this. So if I were to say, found it all blah, 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 I will still get the exact same answer because it's not looking for an exact match, right? If I want it to be an exact match, I'd wrap this guy with X's and that would make it so it has to be an exact match. But all I'm doing here is what is the query found? If you put in the word found, what did he show you? If I were to do the word dapper, you can see this has that X on it. So it is an exact match, right? Whatever I fill in the blank with here is what's going to happen. So it's just chaining these conditionals. That's all the API request is. Really straightforward. So that once you do this, you will be able to put in the word dapper, and it'll say what's his favorite color. When we say all of them, which was the correct answer here, then you'll say find the end of the rainbow. So I made just this simple animated GIF, and you notice that what he's saying there's 572314. The puzzle here was that when you would go into spatial chat, each one of these rooms had a number on it and had a letter in a box. So we'd put a colored box in there, and you were supposed to go throughout all the vendor rooms, find the one that had the right color and the right number, and that would give you a word. You put that all together, and that word would be impact. And once you do that, put in impact, it spits out this Wordle, which is just this exact same one in an iframe. I just grabbed this somewhere off of, grabbed it somewhere off of GitHub, somebody's Wordle clone, and I hard coded it so that the answer would be donor. And when you type in get the wrong answer, you need donor. Eventually, it would actually give you a link to this form, and you would fill out that form, and that's how we actually handled the winners of the contest. So you'd go through this different process, going to the roll your own API, which is just asking whether it matches those conditionals, and it returns each of those answers. Here's a prettier version of that page, and what you can see here is Zepto. Look at that. That's basically the same as jQuery. It's just a little thinner, but it works pretty much the same. And it's just basically going through this. You can see this on my GitHub. You'll notice too, I have the Stassi. This is just a random grab, right? It just grabs math random and it looks at the length of this and it just randomly chooses something. So that's how we ended up with any wrong answer. When you hit the wrong thing, I could have updated this just by adding more things to this JavaScript array. So that's how we did that. Error message it spits out. If you got it right, all it was doing was using jQuery/Zepto to replace what this title was or to replace what the iframe was. And that's it. Got some styling. And then other than that, all we had was this little template. And that's all it is. So there's a simple example of using Roll Your Own API to just simply kind of yes/no response based on somebody filling it in. And that's about as simple as you can get. But, you start thinking about how can you apply that? And I step back again and go back to what Noah Cooper had done with Luminate Extend. He actually has it built into using a bunch of different technologies that are built into Luminate. There's a pixel server that helps you. There's a wrapper that helps you do simple requests. And he basically took all that tougher stuff, authentication, tokenizing, nonces, all that stuff that is probably over a lot of people's heads. And he basically made a library that does the same kind of thing, taking your request, spitting it into a URL, and then processing it to access the Luminate API. Woo, a lot of words. Any questions right now? Because I'll just keep going and going. I'm like a shark that if I stop talking, I suffocate. So any questions at all? Feel free to raise your hand or just ping the chat, or there's a Q&A. You can use it and I'll see that too.
And if people are feeling good and kind of like following along, like thumbs up. If I'm sure there's some other emoji we can use if this is sounding Greek. I've tried to put in the chat like a couple of things for if this is feeling super overwhelming. Like we did a session a couple of years ago that's just like API 101 basics, and also did one where we stepped through. Jeremy showed like some conditionals in that code, and sometimes decoding those conditionals can be a little challenging. So we put some information in there too. So
yeah,
how are folks feeling? Like, have we lost everybody? Or are we doing okay?
I would recommend too, everybody check out Kyle Booth's presentation earlier today. He was kind of taking some of that stuff to the next level and showing some of the stuff that he's done with his nonprofit to do things like conditionalizing what you show on a form, using the E130 tag or the S130 tag to take a page name and throw out the donation ID so that he could load a one-click donation page. A lot of cool stuff that you can do with it. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions. I guess we'll just kind of keep going. So this is kind of a lot of words, and you might not agree with me that this was our simple example of this. But once you've actually started figuring out, okay, I didn't even really use S-tags on that one, right? All I really have here is all it's doing is saying, show me if this word is in the URL, and if it is, spit that out, right? That's really the heart of what you're doing. You start thinking about all the different S tags that are available to you that may not be easily available with Luminate Extend. So here's one, getting participation, Slack. I didn't actually end up putting this in place, but here's a really simple thing I put together using something that I'm going to get a little deeper into with our group thing here in a sec, but not a lot of code behind this. It is kind of complicated code. Yeah, really quick. Okay, the Wordle. So Wordle, I just basically stole it, and I can put it on my URL, on my GitHub. But basically I looked through GitHub to find a Wordle that kind of had the feature set that I was looking for. And then I just looked at the code because the person had written it in React, and I obviously didn't have their generic, like their base files for everything. So I just actually looked at the dictionary list, and I deleted the entire dictionary of possible random. So the way they had built their Wordle, they had a dictionary with all the possible words that could be your Wordle. And when you would load up the program, it would just kind of look at that dictionary and choose a random number, not totally dissimilar to how I was giving those sassy answers based on random. A lot more complicated than that, but same basic theory of it would choose from this dictionary. All I had to do was grab some random person's Wordle, look at their dictionary, delete everything so that there was exactly one word, so that every time it would randomly select any word there, it would go ahead and give you the right answer. So that's how that one was done. I am not nearly fancy enough to build an entire Wordle on my own. The great thing about this, whether you're talking about nonprofit or not nonprofit, is, there's a big wealth of stuff out there that if you understand maybe 1% of it, which is what I'd say is true of that Wordle, you can probably reverse engineer it enough to the point where you can get it. Yeah, if anybody isn't watching the chat too, if you've got spatial chat and Zoom open, that's probably going to give you a lot of stuff going on. So definitely go ahead and hit the power button at the top of spatial chat if you're logged in, and that'll log you out so that you won't get multiple audio streams here. Okay, so back to Slack. So playing around with Slack. So Slack has an entire sandbox of make your own app and feed it into Slack. And theoretically, you could build something that'll spit out whatever you want, like literally whatever you want into Slack. And we never put this live because this is very, very much beta. I put this together in maybe an hour and a half. But what I did was I basically created a very, very basic app in Slack's app thing that used Zapier. If you've never used Zapier before, it's a service that creates webhooks on demand for you based on some really simple language. You don't have to be a coder to set it up, but basically what Zapier lets you do is say, whenever this gets triggered, go do this thing. And sky's the limit with what you can do. But you pay per usage, and so it can probably get expensive fairly quickly. I'm sure they've got like a nonprofit discount. But using Zapier, I was able to basically trigger this to make a web service that when you're in Slack, you could issue a Slack command and say, I want to know, I don't even know what this was because honestly, it's been like 6 years. But when you trigger this, it will reach into the roll your own API and it will use a key to make sure not anybody can do this, right? We don't want just anybody able to go in and access your entire database. And then all it's going to do here is it's going to look for whatever I put into the URL. So again, notice this S334. This is how I'm telling my roll your own API what I want. So in this case, I built this Slack bot to basically take a URL that had text equals a event ID. So all this would be is your FRID, and it would just go ahead and throw that in there. And if you're familiar with S42, it's one of the most useful TeamRaiser tags you'll ever find. This will spit out the city, the event date, and the amount raised. And it'll just spit out as a proof of concept what city raised on what date, how much money they made. That was one thing you can do with an FRID. I also, this is just test. So you can see anytime you see 6 colons, this is just a comment, but I was playing around with also having it so that it could actually go through a list and spit out people in a list. And then I will get into that here in just a second. But again, this is just an example of, even if you delete all this, this is really the entire thing. All you're doing is using a third-party service to actually trigger this, and you go in and you grab the city, and then it would make a chat bot in Slack that, that's not super useful, but again, you start extrapolating out what you could do with it, and it could be pretty deep what you can do. Now let's get into, I don't need you anymore. Let's see. All right, this one's cool. Taking that concept of spitting out, so that Slack one was a demonstration of what you could do just spitting out some S42 tags to give you details on a city. That's actually really ho-hum on a web page. You could do that really easily with Luminate Extend, or even do it directly with like an Ajax call and not using Luminate Extend if you can figure out how to tokenize and all that. What we did here was this was right around the time a certain person was elected into office and had campaigned quite a bit on the idea of taking an axe to the Accountable Care Act and basically making it so that, in our case, prostate cancer patients who absolutely depended on their health care that they got through ACA, who would lose it and now get to stop chemo thanks to political points being won. So we kicked around the idea of doing a campaign where you could basically sign on to a petition and have that immediately respond. We wanted to build it on Luminate because we wanted to use this as an acquisition source, right? So what we did was we made a survey in Luminate that was very simple. It was first name, last name, email address, and zip code. And this is a scraped form. I'll show you guys the code here in just a sec, guys and gals. Just a sec here, but what will happen is you would when you submit this is a simple scraped form that will submit directly to our Luminate instance and submit a survey. Also, that will throw you into a group. We capture your baseline information. We dedupe automatically because you're already in our database if we got your email and zip code, right? We add some basic content here, talking about protecting funding. And we ask people, can we count you in on fighting for funding? Luminate then would go ahead and create this list of every single person who opted in, and you're signing it up so that you could add yourself to the list. And this list actually had a lot of people on it. It went really well. So I did a little bit of JavaScript that more or less uses the roll your own API to go to Luminate, grab the S450 or 405 tag. We'll see it here in a second, which normally what that would do is spit out a list of people who have joined a group, right? But it'll spit it out in a list format with LIs and ULs around it, and it kind of has some opinionated styling. All this roll your own API does is it actually spits that out, strips out all the extra HTML, and spits out a normal JSON list that looks like this, right? So this is a really simple, all it is our list of people that are in this group, and it spits out the whole long name of the list, okay? And what that looks like on the code side of things would be, let's get into the group scroller. So this is that page. This is all supposed to be kind of like a content mirror black to let you know what's going on. This is the actual script. This is all that is actually running this. Okay, and I'll take a look here. And I know we're getting close to time. So let me know again, be bold and speak up if you've got questions. But basic behind this is you've got a whitelist, which is just a regular text file that's been saved. And you can see here on the left, my whitelist. All it is just a list of groups that I want to allow. It would be a horrendously bad idea to give absolutely open access to everything in your system when you use this roll your own API. You might even in an ideal world want to require a login, and there are ways to do that through, there's an S-tag for getting an authentication cookie in a JavaScript session or a session created on the server for a user. There are methods for actually logging a user in without their password if you've got it configured right, or you could do a server-side request to verify that this is somebody in your system. But you don't just want somebody to be able to hammer your API and then get every person in your database by name, right? Huge security problem. So what we do instead is you go in and you define the group ID that you're going to allow and just save it into a simple list. And then what this is going to do is S51, is it S51 or S63? They'll spit out a page builder. It might be S84. I don't know. Whatever the tag is to spit out a page builder content. I should know that right off the top of my head. But anyway, this is going to go check that list, and it's going to say, are they on the OK list? And if they're one of the groups that are on that OK list, it's going to look at whatever the URL was, look for GID for group ID, and then it's going to create that JSON object that basically goes in and uses an E130 tag to strip out all the extra, the LIs, the UL, and it just takes those and it replaces all the LIs with a comma, because that's what JSON is going to want, right? It replaces the UL at the start with the top header. And then if you want, you can actually add a callback in it so you can get JSONP if you're offsite. So what that ends up doing, though, is it spits out this guy here, and it's just the results, right? And I can actually add callback. If I wanted this to be in JSONP, you can do that, and now you get the wrapper around it so that you can get past CORS problems. So this is a really simple result, and then all we had to do from there was feed it into jQuery to spit out into a scroller. I just grabbed a scrolling library that will take a list and kind of scroll through it. Did a little JavaScript to insert the name into the middle of it. When you go into the GitHub, they'll be available later here. What you're going to see in here is you'll see just basically this is what you would save into Luminate. Here's your whitelist. And then here's some examples of exactly how you could use this. Okay, so for the sake of demo, I've broken this out a couple different ways. So this is just something simple that you can do with the data, is what you'll see at the top. I defined some things so it's easy to tell what you'd have to customize for your own. Okay. And then the last thing here is here's a couple different ways that you could call that exact list that we have here. So I create a function called getList, and when you look at this, all it's doing is, again, it's fetching the URL. So it looks and says, what's the URL that I want? And in this case, it's just got the GID, and I name my file something different than what my GitHub's going to have. So I put the name in there. And then all it's going to do is fetch that URL and spit out the data. And then it'll run it through this function at the top, which all I did was that. So this is the person who's registered and how many people have registered in total. So that's one way you could do it. Fetch is more modern code. If you're on your own website, so if we're on support.zerocancer.org and I don't have to worry about cross-domain restrictions, I can use this. If I was offsite, it won't let me use the content because I'll get blocked by the cross-domain restrictions. So that's where you use JSONP by adding a callback, but it's doing pretty much the same thing. If you know anything about JSONP, this is a really simple thing. It's just going to spit it out and call that exact same thing from before of output fifth. And I called it output fifth because I just told it to grab the fifth person that was there. And actually it should be 4 since there's 0 index. The third way that you could do this is with jQuery. And this is what that would look like. You're just going to use the get JSON. You do that in Zepto. There are other ways you could do this. You could do this with LO. You could do this with you name it. But again, you're just going to access that. You got your page wrapper as no, your GID, and the callback in this case is a question mark, just because that's what jQuery wants for your JSONP object. So that's how we created that scrolling object. Last thing, and I only got 4 minutes left, so if anybody has questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, one last thing that you can do. Once you've kind of got this idea down, you can create, let's say you wanted to, with this guy, this is our very simple endurance website. We have upcoming events, we've got past events, and when you refresh the page, it's going to randomly, just because it's pulling it through the API, it's going to spit out these cards that have the details of what our live events are and then our published but not registration events, okay? That's one thing you might want to do. With all the API methods that exist within Luminate, surprisingly, there's no method that says take the event ID and spit out details of the event. We got it. You can search by name of the city. I think you can search by distance from a specific zip code. You can search by how soon they're happening. You can switch by a search match on the name. But amazingly enough, there's nothing that lets you just put in what the FRID is like you would in S-Tag and spit out the details. So I built a couple different versions of a similar parser to the other ones that spit out a JSON object so that we can just process them. And these are very, very simple. I'll zoom in a little bit here. So this was one of those, get theme razors by custom, and this code will be in on my GitHub. I'll just show it to you really quickly. But again, I use this little doohickey to try to explain what's going on. All it's really doing is, you can see in here, this is an S-tag that says if I've got the TRID or FRID, if it's defined, then spit out what the street is, right? If it's not defined, then spit out null. So all this is going to do is go through here and define all these different data points and spit them out as a JSON object. So you can see street address spits out here, right? Mailing address, attention to, we didn't set on this specific event, but this is an actual team razor that's happening right now. So if I were to increment this and I get one, so that was our Baltimore event, here's our Boston event. And these are all just regular S42 tags for the most part. When I got to the bottom, one of the things that this doesn't really do super well, check out my session on Wednesday where I'm going to be talking about some of the ways that we customize the admin. I talked a little bit about this last year, but Luminate doesn't spit out specifically, this is the day of the week that your event will happen on. It just basically has a specific date format that will always spit out. So I did make a little bit of custom. Almost everything on here is basic. I'm doing these checks to say, don't spit out something if there's not an answer, right? So all of these are just a conditional to say, is this actually defined? If so, spit it out. If not, then don't. But then when I got to the bottom, I wanted to see how many days to the event. We have that within Team Razor. That one's actually really easy. It's just an S-tag. What we don't have is the full month event day. And that requires you to take the number format that it's got, do a replace all to say, if it's the 12th month, make it December. If it's the 10th month, make it October. If it's a future event. So I did all this little processing. And again, you'll see that. Just some processing to check what the server time is right now by using the days to event. If it's a negative number, then say false. And if it's not, then say true, is what this guy here does. And then the slug, if you've used a shortcut URL on one of these guys, you should be able to see in your slug what you've set in step 14. So this is actually really useful from an SEO standpoint to have a much shorter URL, but Luminate doesn't really give you a way to expose it. So this is one of the things that's actually really, really helpful from an SEO standpoint that, I mean, Luminate is that, I don't know of any system that does this, but all we're doing here is we're actually taking the setting on the customized URL, right? Using E130 to remix the data, replace our support.zerocancer.org with zerocancer.run, replace everything in the middle with whatever, and make it so that all that's left is a customized URL and spits it out. I'm at time. Y'all know me. I can keep going and going forever, but I'm going to respect everybody's time. And that's what I got. Check out my GitHub. It'll be updated by the end of the week with all these details and more.
And I'll put a shameless plug for the community. Obviously, you know, Jeremy is pretty responsive, very helpful. You will see him as a frequent flyer in the community. You know, friend him. Put your complicated things in there and he'll help you, or one of the other 30 people that have been in here today, since I see a lot of folks have been playing in here. So love to see what everybody's doing. And Jeremy, thanks for showing some of these examples of what you and the team at Zero have been doing.
Thank you all. And don't forget to vote for Slidio at the end of all of these sessions. I'm not too worried about winning the golden ticket or anything, but definitely do it just so that we can keep in mind with this one is pretty heady, pretty detailed, technical. So it's good to get that feedback of, hey, let's make it a little simpler, or let's do more of this. It helps us in future years as we're figuring out what we're going to do. So look for that, and thank you all. Have a great day.